Good afternoon, good early evening. We are live, but we're going to let the stream breathe a little bit as everybody starts coming in. We are able to add our Facebook communities across the Mile High Huddle webosphere and bring them in so that everybody can be part of this. You know, it's hot. We got to let it breathe. And welcome in, everybody. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast brought to you by you. Fan-funded Mile High Huddle podcast. I am Scott Kennedy. I'm still filling in for, what's his name again? He's been gone so long. For Chad Jensen.
Yeah, there it is.
And this over here is Zack Kelberman. You know him. He's an old hand. And I'm one half of the football priest, so it's just football priest tonight. But I'm going to do what I can to make sure that we have a good time for the next hour or so. Zack, how are you doing, my friend?
Well, you're the deacon, Scott. Don't sell yourself short. We got the football priest and we got the deacon. I'm doing pretty well. Looking at myself in the video feed right now, I look like an N64 graphic character, so I need to upgrade my green screen for sure. But we have a pretty solid show, I think, tonight, Scott, for the masses. I hope everyone's having a great night, and thank everyone for tuning in with us tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into we're gonna do some deep diving for one, and then we're gonna hit some low-hanging fruit stuff. I know we want to talk about the salary cap health of the Denver Broncos and where things might change over the course of the next year, 2 years, 3 years. We can talk about CBS Sports did a piece on the most underrated player on every team. I was very curious to see who they were going to name for the Denver Broncos, and I think you will be too if you haven't seen it also. And then we can also do dive into the redraft that was done. And for me, Zach, what also that means about, F them picks. I look at that redraft and I'm like, oh, that's the best you can do at 15? Really? Trade them all, man. Trade all those picks. If you don't have a top five, it ain't worth anything. So we're going to hit all of those things tonight. I want to say hello to some folks into the chat. Dale has been in here bright and early. Diamond Rattler coming in also. William Catalano, good afternoon. I don't recognize the name. It threw me off a little bit. Has been in here chatting for a while, so welcome in. Let me see. Mark Hoynak coming in, saying good evening all, and good evening to you as well. And Jeff Noyes also saying I appreciate the effort. Nothing in these reports surprised me. You can scroll back up in the chat talking about some strength and conditioning also. I know that has been one of your hot button topics the last couple of years.
Well, I'm tired of seeing Broncos injuries, and they're all lower body injuries, soft tissue injuries. And my last straw with Lauren Landau and the conditioning staff came last year when two inside linebackers, Jewell and A.J. Johnson, suffered torn pectoral season-ending injuries within, again, like a week of each other. Same injury, same positional group. That needs to change. I believe Landau was retained for the upcoming season. There might have been some tweaks to his staff, but it's not just my bias. It's not just a coincidence anymore. It's a pattern with the regimen that's not been paying off well for the Broncos.
That one's so weird. I'm willing to say, I've mentioned this before, and he told the story again tonight. One of the kids on our team, his dad played in the NFL for about 8 years. And he was telling me again today, because his arms bothered him a little bit, talking about the different strength and conditioning regimens. He said they had a guy come in to one of the places he was at and change everything. Linemen weren't allowed to lift. They were doing all plyometric stuff. And he said basically the whole team pulled a hamstring in the first couple of weeks of camp as they were doing this. He said it paid dividends down the line. So I see the correlation there. But, man, a torn pectoral, how does that even happen? I mean, that's one of the single rarest injuries to happen twice. You want to say, I know Chad likes to say we don't believe in coincidences around here, but my goodness, to have that happen twice to both linebackers, both pectoral muscles. I mean, you'll count on one hand how many times you hear the term torn pectoral to a football player over the course of a decade. To happen twice in one season maybe that is a little bit more of a coincidence, Zach.
Yeah, I just want the Broncos to avoid the injury bug. And I know injuries are part of the game. I'm not going to blame every ailment on Lauren Landau or the conditioning program. The Broncos have to weather the storm. It's a war of attrition. Any cliche fits in this regard, but they've had some bad breaks, literally and figuratively, and it seems like a lot of the lower body stuff, soft tissue stuff can be averted, can be avoided, and it seems the Broncos don't want to avoid that. Hopefully that changes.
I misspoke on that. I said maybe it is a bit more of a coincidence. I mean, maybe is more than a coincidence. So I did misspeak. If anybody comes in later, say, yeah, Scott, you just said it was a coincidence, and you said it wasn't. I misspoke. That feels more than a coincidence. As rare as those are, to have two of them happen, that it's just weird. Again, like I said, that feels like a little bit more than a coincidence. And I try and give guys a benefit of the doubt on things like this for sure, because we don't have all the information. So I want to leave in a little room for hey, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I don't, but this is strange. It is strange. What's not strange is Phil coming in with the stars.
Thank you.
It's a very common occurrence here on the Mile High Huddle podcast, and we certainly thank you for it. Phil, appreciate you being here. And he says, good evening, Zack and Scott. Let's ride. Go Broncos. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. Marcus Lewis Henna is coming in late from the UK. We're about a 5. I'm in the Eastern time zone, and that's about a 5-hour time difference. So we're talking, 1:30 in the morning, staying up late with us tonight. So, hopefully we won't put you to sleep. You'll be fired up after watching this tonight, and you'll be ready to run through some walls. So, appreciate you being here, Marcus. Now, Zack, want to get into the topic a little bit. Broncos have fallen off some, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? Last year, talking about salary cap health, the Broncos had the number 1 position, but PFF did an article and Bob Morris did a really good job of summing it up and summarizing for us on milehighhuddle.com, where the Broncos, where their salary cap health was on a 3-year analysis, not just, hey, I can look and see how much room you have for this year, but what's it look like down the road? And it had the Denver Broncos ranking 13th from first last year. Why the fall, and is that any reason for concern?
A lot of dead money, first of all, from the previous regime. A lot of bad contracts. I believe it was last season, the season before, they were still paying off Case Keenum. And then last year, they were still paying off Juwan James. So the fact that Elway left Peyton with a bit of a mess on his hands didn't help matters. But I think 13th is relatively good considering the highly paid contracts they've shelled out, considering what they'll have to do with Russell Wilson. George Payton has shown that he's a stickler when it comes to contracts. He likes to get the best value. And I think that number, Scott, will change. They'll rise higher, maybe to 10th or 9th, 8th, whatever, because Peyton has shown to be frugal and he'll get his guy at his value. He showed that not once, but twice. 2 different receivers, 2 below market level contracts in Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick. So 13th is an arbitrary number as far as I'm concerned. It's also a projection based on what PFF and everyone else is trying to calculate. But Peyton has come in and cleaned up a lot of what John Elway left behind. A lot of what he left behind was bad contracts, bad salaries.
I actually feel like, comparatively speaking, again, looking at some of the rest of the league, that the Broncos were in decent shape from a cap position. But part of that, to be fair, was because they kept missing on quarterbacks. The reason why you were, even with some bad contracts, why you weren't in cap hell is because you didn't have a $30 million quarterback. That's where all that money goes out the window, and the salary cap starts to hurt you a little bit. Guess what you're going to have next year? Guess what you've got coming, what you've got on the books now? You've got a very expensive quarterback, and that's part of the reason for things to go down. Oh, well, okay. I need that quarterback. If you've got a cost-controlled rookie who's playing at a high level, that's one thing. But, most contending teams have a high dollar quarterback on their salary cap. Now, you mentioned the genius move of going out, and not only it made sense at the time, giving Sutton and Patrick the extensions before you went and solidified your quarterback position. But what do you think that conversation was like with those guys saying, listen, I don't want to be here if you can't get a quarterback? And George Payton says, we got one coming. We're going to get a quarterback in the offseason. Sign the deals. Trust me. And he delivered. Do you think he's got any credibility in that locker room right now?
Very much so, and I'm sure that factored in. I'm sure Peyton said, listen, guys, trust me, it's the last season of Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. I'll get you a legitimate quarterback for the first time. But looking at it from their points of view, Sutton's coming off a season-ending injury. Tim Patrick's pretty much a relative no one, a former undrafted for whatever he was, late round pick, a no one in NFL circles, and now he's developing something in Denver. So the fact the Broncos wanted to invest in them at all, hand them guaranteed money, hand them multi-year contracts, that was a sign of good faith on George Paton's part as well. And I think they were fortunate to get those offers. What George Paton did not foresee, though, or maybe he did because he's a wizard, was that the wide receiver market, Scott, was going to explode a few months later. I mean, Christian Kirk getting $84 million when, two of the receivers they signed in Sutton and Patrick combined for that one total. So it's good. It's just another indication that they're in good hands with the salary cap. And it might be 13th now, but might not be a couple years from now.
You went right there, because for me, part one was doing it before they had their big seasons. Let's do this before they've got great seasons. Right. Because we don't have a quarterback right now. They're undervalued across the league. We value you. If we look at your numbers and if you were to go to arbitration right now, you might get this based on your numbers. Well, we know you're better than that. We're going to invest in you in the future. Part one. Part two, this may have been lucky. It may have been good. But like you just said, was the wide receiver market went berserk in the offseason, went berserk. There's an article floating around about the best contracts, and I put it on my Twitter feed. The best contracts in 32 best contracts in the NFL, which, I also said the alternate title was that is 32 players looking for new agents. You don't want to be the biggest bargain on I don't want to be like, man, I don't want to be a bargain. I want to be compensated. Well, I think number 3 on that list was Courtland Sutton. And as far as the best contract out there, yeah, 10, 11 million a year, that's 2-3 money right now. That's half. That's less than Christian Kirk got. Who'd you rather have? Come on. That's an easy answer. So they might think about, as the salary cap increases, restructuring again, just to say, thank you. Hey, we've got you at 10. Let's go to 15. They don't have to, but it may end up depending on the production that these guys are able to do. And if you want to keep them happy, it might be something they end up doing. But yes, that was part 2 of the wonderful salary cap management from George Paton and the Denver Broncos.
Making that even better was the fact that Sutton and Patrick already restructured this offseason to free up cap space. I mean, the fact that they accepted those deals, that's very admirable on their part. They're team first guys. I have a lot of respect for them for doing so, but for George Paton to build a type of contract where less than a year later, he can restructure it to get more salary cap, almost taking out a second mortgage on those contracts to help out the Broncos salary cap. I mean, you might not have felt good about it in his rookie season at some points, but by now, June 23rd, 2022, you got to feel good about how the Broncos are being handled by George Paton and also the salary cap, how he's navigating that.
Absolutely. And I went last year, I kind of went off. It was like September, and ESPN did a ranking of front offices, and they gave the Broncos a D. A D. I'm like, you're sitting number 1 in salary cap space, and you've got a roster that everybody says is a quarterback short of competing for big titles, big things. How do you get a D on that? That's really good. And it basically boiled down to they didn't address the quarterback position in the offseason. Okay, that's it. That's the one thing. You didn't draft Justin Fields. Okay, that's maybe you give him an A- then instead of an A. You got a ton of money and a talented roster. What more do you want from your front office?
The laziness of ESPN. They don't take it into account that George Paton was a highly coveted executive. He finally took the plunge and landed with the Broncos. And in less than a year, he worked them back into relevancy. And a little more than a year later, traded for a franchise quarterback in Russell Wilson. So, Scott, you say it all the time, and I echo it a lot too. We share a brain on this. I don't care what ESPN has to say. I don't care what grade they give the Broncos. And I guarantee you, if you ask them now what that grade would be, what, A- because they have Russell Wilson? No, it's because they have the guy, George Paton, who traded for Russell Wilson. They'll all see, though. Let them hate, baby.
Yeah, nothing changed in the front office. Now you're just going to give them the front office was a D? Come on. That never, I mean, again, if I got the old Irishman in me, if something makes me mad, by God, I'm going to remember it for the rest of your life, my life, someone else's life. I got grudges I hold back to kindergarten. It's not healthy. what is healthy, and actually I was sitting here in the chat waiting to click here to say hello to Michaela, the Duchess. One, because I don't get to say it online, in person enough. But two, Michaela was in a crap mood when we signed off last night. In a crap mood. And I have a feeling the overtime victory, Michaela went to bed a very, very happy Colorado sports fan last night. But Michaela comes in here with a Michaela bomb. She says, I'm not worried about the cap. We all know it's an imaginary line that can be manipulated. Salary cap does not really exist, just like Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. I disagree on this. It can be manipulated, but the salary cap doesn't matter as long as the players are still good, as long as they're still producing. When you start running into $20-25 million cap hits on guys that are declining, I promise you'll see it. Look no further. You've got one of the experts on watching a team in your local market in the Atlanta Falcons that have absolutely put on a clinic on how not to run the salary cap. Depending on what they do with Deion Jones, they could end up with $70 million of dead cap money this year. That's 1/3 of their roster. 1/3. Go to Spot Rack, go to Over the Cap, sort by cap hit on your team, and knock $70 million off of it and come and talk to me. Knock $70 million off of your team and tell me how competitive you're going to be. There's Falcons fans telling me they're going to go 10-7 this year. They're out of their freaking minds. But yes, Michaela says, happy joy. I had a feeling Michaela would be in a much better mood when I heard the results this morning. So congratulations, 3-1. Put in a team out, coming back and beating a team in overtime to go up 3-1. This one's over. It's over, y'all. Polish that cup.
Well, boy, am I happy the Broncos hired Peyton and not Terry Fontenot, because that's who I wanted the Broncos to hire, and he went to Atlanta.
Wasn't Terry's fault, though.
I know the Matt Ryan deal and the contract and everything, but
yeah,
it's a lot of dead money.
These are all dead from Thomas Dimitroff. Every one of these is Thomas Dimitroff contracts. I am very impressed that he had the stones to eat that's dead money, which needed to happen. Again, they're a decaying roster. In order to bounce back, they had to, again, bringing this back into Broncos full circle. The Seattle Seahawks were about 1 year behind where the Atlanta Falcons are. That's where they were heading. So some talented pieces, a decaying roster, a really good quarterback, and rather than try and just kick the can down the road and get a $40 million cap hit for Russell Wilson, they said, hey, listen, we're not going to be good enough for this guy's window. We need to get what we can. And they did a good job of getting a trade for him.
Well, you can call me Carrot Top because I'm going to use a prop to make my next point here. I agree with you, Scott, that the salary cap is real. It's not fake. It's not phony. It's real, just like this thing is real. But you see what I'm doing with it? How malleable it is? That's a salary cap. If you want to sign someone, you can find a way to sign someone. If you want to trade someone, trade for someone, you can do it. I mean, the Chiefs were the perfect example of that, and they put to bed any lingering misconceptions about the salary cap by the Patrick Mahomes deal, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. They fit that all in when they didn't have, I think, enough money to make a car payment. Scott, $400 on their books. So it's real for sure. It exists, but there's so many ways around it. There's so many things you can do that it starts like this and ends like that.
It's a very good visual for those that are listening. It's basically a sponge. It's malleable. It's flexible. It is change. And Zach, what's it take? What does it take from ownership and from a franchise in order to have the most flexibility? Cash. It takes cash. You've got to be able to take those players' salaries and convert them into signing bonuses and spread them across multiple years. Denver Broncos, do they have any money? Does their ownership have any money? You have to refresh my memory on this one.
Yeah. I was going to say winning. is the best thing for the salary cap too, because when you win, players want to take less money to play for you. Players will restructure their deals to give you some salary cap relief. Look at Tom Brady and the Patriots all those years. He kept taking less and less money so the team can be better around you. But you're right. Having cash on hand, having liquid
cash,
is
and that's
important.
what could happen. It's like the plan is you could end up extending Russell Wilson, giving him a new contract that's going to have some of those crazy numbers attached to it. 5 years, $150 million.
Ignore it.
And his cap number goes down. His salary cap number goes down because you take his current salary, you pay him off, you give him a $60 million signing bonus guaranteed, spread that across 5 years, and then your salary works up. So it does escalate, but his initial number goes down. So I'm able to bring in maybe another edge rusher or right tackle or something along those lines. But having cash on hand allows you to do something like that. So, and Dave from Georgia coming in, he says, appreciate the super coming in yellow. Thank you, Dave. Says, I don't care what the experts say. If our running game is effective, our passing game will scare the hell out of everyone. Hashtag Broncos country. Thanks again for all you do for Broncos country. Dave, thank you. Without guys like you, there's nothing for guys like Zack and I to do. So, except, we might get onto this would be a Zoom call between me and him saying, yeah, did you see that latest article? Oh, I wasn't reading that one either. Yeah. Okay. I'll see you later. So appreciate you being on
scary
here.
Accurate.
And the run and the balance. You want to talk about what's exciting? Russell Wilson's the worst against cover 4 last year. Okay. Well, you know what cover 4 is? That's everybody going backwards. Run the damn ball.
Right.
I know how to beat a cover 4. I'm going to turn around and hand it off and beat them up the middle. That's how I'm going to beat a cover 4. So, and you can do that. It's the balance in this offense should be absolutely exciting.
If you can do that, Scott, you're more qualified than Pat Shurmur because he couldn't do that last year or the year before. But I digress on that. Dave, I agree with you, but the Broncos passing game is going to be scary regardless of the running game. And I happen to think Javonte is going to be 1,000-yard back. Melvin Gordon and Mike Boone will help out a little bit in the running game, but take away all of them. You still have the receivers that you have, the tight ends that you have, and most importantly, the quarterback that you have in Russell Wilson. They didn't make this trade to run the ball. They didn't make this trade to let Russ not cook. He's going to cook in Denver. He's going to whip up something special, something tasty, and that's going to scare the hell, to use your words, Dave, out of everyone on that alone, what he can do alone with the strength of his right arm.
Appreciate it, Dave. And Sam coming in orange says, hello, Zack and Scott. Speaking of the salary cap, what exactly does it mean when teams restructure contracts and free up space? Do some players get paid after they are done playing for that team or retire? Go Broncos.
Unless you're Bobby Bonilla.
I was going to say Bobby Bonilla signed a 50-year Bobby Bonilla. Happy Bobby Bonilla Day. Gets another $1 million. Isn't that crazy? That's genius. So crazy. If you don't know what we're talking about, just Google Bobby Bonilla Day. Great player in the 80s and 90s, signed a huge deal that included a $1 million payment for like 25 years. It's maybe more because I still hear about this. But going back to, it's off season. We can spend a little bit of time on this. If you have more questions, follow up for sure. But what it typically means when they restructure to free up space, let's say you're owed, Zack's my quarterback, and his cap number is, he's got 1 year left on his deal. He's got $30 million left on it. So his cap number is $30 million. What I can do is I can give him an extension of 3 years and $90 million. Okay. So it's still basically the same $30 million, but I can take that 30 that I owe him now and give it to him as a signing bonus. I can give it to him as cash and say, okay, here's $30 million. That's 30 of 90. And let's say the whole thing's even guaranteed, but you're going to have a $10 million salary this year. And then I spread the signing bonus across all 3 years, 10, 10, and 10. So his cap number went from 30 to 20, the 10-year salary, and then the prorated signing bonus that goes across it. Now, what mostly happens with these phony contracts in the NFL, except for Deshaun Watson and rookies, is the back end isn't guaranteed money. It's add-on to get that signing bonus spread up as much as possible. So let's say I wanted to guarantee him $60 million. Okay, now instead of $5 million, or instead of 3 years in the contract, I might make it a 5-year, but it's still only $60 million guaranteed. I pay you 60 up front. Now it's 12, 12, 12, 12 across those 5. Now, if I cut him after the 3 years, because that was always the plan, he has a dead cap number of two seasons of 12 and 12, or they front load that all into one season. He's got a dead cap number of 24 million. Hope that makes sense. I said there'd be too much, there wouldn't be math, but basically the long story short, to have cap flexibility, I need cash. I need to have cash because I want to pay all of that as a signing bonus so I can prorate it across the length of the deal. So when you read these 10-year, $450 million contracts, my ass, find out what the guaranteed money is. That's how long that contract is. And then keep an eye on the dead cap number. When that dead cap number starts getting low and the salary cap number starts getting high, that player ain't playing on that contract anymore. That's when you know the contract ends. Appreciate the question, Dave. Anything you want to add on that, Zach? Since I just went on for like 6 minutes?
That was a lot of math. So I'm going to just say I concur, and I'll add a couple of things to your point. You're fully, you're right with what you're saying, how you explained it better than I can explain it for sure. It's kicking the can down the road, first of all, when you restructure. It's, taking something now and having to pay it back later, almost like a credit card. And a lot of what they do when they restructure is convert a base salary to a signing bonus. Just like Scott said, you're tacking it on to the end of the contract. But what so many teams do now is have these void years, these dummy years that players are never going to see. What I wanted to say before about Russell Wilson's number, why I said ignore it when you were talking, Scott, 5 years, $250 million. I care about the structure of the deal. I care about the details of that deal. Patrick Mahomes got all the headlines for signing a $500 million contract, but it's pretty much pay as you go. It's a year-by-year deal. Randy Gregory, the big headline was $70 million. You and I talked about it, Scott, before anybody else. It's really a 2-year deal and not a lot of investment beyond that. So the way the contracts are structured, the details of it, the minutia, that's the most important thing. Ignore the headline grabbing guaranteed money or yearly salary. That's for clicks. When you boil down contracts, they're actually pretty simple and front-loaded.
Yeah, again, for the headline stuff, because it makes for good headlines, wasn't a $70 million contract, $28 million guaranteed. That's his contract. He has a $28 million contract. Everything else then becomes club options for 1 year. If you look at this and why we say it's a 2-year deal, why Zack just said that, he's got a dead cap number of $28 million this year because you signed that, you gave him that signing bonus and spread it across several seasons. And as those years go up, the dead cap number goes down. $28 million dead cap money means you're keeping a player. He's not going anywhere, unless your team is awful and you're the Atlanta Falcons and you eat $40 million of dead cap money on your quarterback. But that's not going to happen with the guy you just signed. His dead cap number next year is $22 million. His cap hit is 16. So it still costs you more to get rid of him than it would be to keep him. The following year, 2024, this is when you know it's the end of a contract, when it becomes the club option. His cap hit is $16 million. His dead cap number is 6. When it starts saving you money to get rid of a guy, that guy better be productive. He's got to earn it. Then it becomes 1-year deals. 1-year deals with club options. And frankly, Zach, it's kind of BS, honestly. In the most dangerous sport of them all, it's the one that doesn't have the guaranteed contracts. I think it's unfair. And what really makes me mad is that the media will hold water for the organizations. When a guy holds out, he just had a big season and he's way, way, way underpaid and he holds out. Well, he's got a contract. He should be in camp. All these guys have contracts and they're cut all the time when they have contracts because that's what's beneficial to the team. Well, what about what's beneficial to the guy and his family? I'm never, ever, ever going to give a player stick for holding out and trying to get what he is worth on an open market in a monopolized system like this where all the power is in the ownership.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And when Kirk Cousins signed that 3-year, $90 million fully guaranteed contract, he was given so much slack, but I thought that was innovative. I thought that was so creative and a genius stroke on the part of his agent and his own negotiating prowess. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Players should get what they can get, and the most guaranteed money for a sport that doesn't have a lot of longevity in it, as we've seen year after year.
And you let me know the next time one of these owners goes broke, please. Let me know, because
maybe Daniel Snyder.
The reason why they put salary caps in there is because they can't control themselves. They want to spend all the money they've got. They can't control themselves, so they have to put a salary cap in there because you've got people that would just blow and spend. If they didn't have a cap, they wouldn't stop spending. They're like a drunken ex with your credit card. So George Fox coming in. with some stars. He says, thanks for your insight to the team. Every day we're closer to training camp. Then it's football. Go Broncos. It's almost July. I mean, do they still have like the Canton, the Hall of Fame game, like at the end of July? They start playing real football in July these days, don't they? Preseason that early. So it's almost here. Getting closer. Appreciate the stars, George.
Still thinking about that, though. It's bad enough if a drunk person has your card, but a drunk ex, if they had my credit card, I'd be broke. Capital B.
With a vendetta? Yeah, she's pissed. Pissed.
Would not be good. Thank you, George.
Wasn't my fault. Tell that to the credit card company. So, Michaela coming back in for the third time. Says contracts should all be guaranteed. Those guys take years off their lives. You see so many dying young. And that's the extreme. It is common, Michaela, but the health problems, my God, that anybody I know that played beyond high school, and I know a few of them, have been around for a while. They all have health problems, getting out of bed in the morning. It's just, the concussions really made headlines and have scared a lot of parents away from football. Participation is down in youth football over the last decade, and it really started with the talk about the concussions. It's the knees, it's the elbows, it's the hips, it's the neck, it's everything. So yeah, guarantee them. I'm so glad they did that with the rookie contracts. It made no sense. Zach, I don't know if you remember, it wasn't that long ago. The highest paid player, if a quarterback went number 1 overall in the draft, he immediately became the highest paid player in the NFL.
Sam Bradford.
That was insane. That was absolutely ridiculous. So having a structure like that, it's un-American and anti-capitalist, but it's having a structure like that where it's at least guaranteed, I think it's a whole lot better off for the health of these players for sure.
That's the only positive thing Goodell has done since becoming commissioner is the rookie wage scale. That's the only thing, and I commend him for that because you're right. It made things a lot more realistic and just a little more normal. But, Michaela, you make a good point here. Look at Jalen Ferguson from the Rams, 27 years old. He passes away. We don't know why, but the why doesn't matter. He still passed away. And, you went on your soapbox for a second. I'm going to go on mine, Scott. It was ridiculous yesterday seeing that sham of house testimony from Roger Goodell talking about inflated footballs and Tom Brady nicknames when you have a player who just dropped dead out of nowhere in the prime of his career, prime of his life, 27 years old football player. There is a scary component to the game that we love. And yes, it is a game, but it can be life and death. Even if you don't die right away, like Scott mentioned, the health concerns that linger, CTE and everything else, concussions, heart issues, bone issues. You got to get what you can get for sure.
Yeah, painkillers and all those things that it's got a prescription. I got a prescription for it. It can't be bad for me, right? Right. It's all yes. So I am for the players on this. I watch the players, and I am all about the guarantee contracts. And again, people, why did, well, there's a zillion reasons why, but why did the owners start piping up about Deshaun Watson's contract? Not because he was facing all of these sexual misconduct charges. It's because it was guaranteed. It was $250 million guaranteed. And I don't want to, why would I want to pay guaranteed money if I don't have to? I'd rather promise somebody the money. And if they don't live up to it, cut them. I don't need them. I can just, maybe. And I understand performance-based contracts. I do, that's okay with me too, but again, if you've got a 3-year deal and you get cut and you're not owed zero, then you're owed nothing. You don't have a 3-year deal. You don't have a 3-year contract. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Most of the people on performance-based deals, like Melvin Gordon, for example, they're either young players just starting out that aren't stars yet or stars that were not deserving of their last contract. So they got to settle for prove-it deals. I have no problem with that either. I'm pretty sure, though, I did mention Ravens, right? I want to get it correctly. I don't think I said Rams, but if I did, I take it back. It was the Ravens, Jalen Ferguson, very sad. And also, as Michaela points out, the Goose, Tony Saragusa, man, 55 years old, way too young. One of the funniest NFL players you'll ever see, kind-hearted, humble guy, bigger than life. And now look, it's just what a sad day it was yesterday.
This is a part I'm gonna get after you guys on this one on here. It's a choice. They know making the risks. Really disagree on the contract stuff. The collective bargaining agreement covers all that. The union agreed. Players voted. Wasn't a result of a monopoly. Really? What was their choices? If as professional athletes with a talent and a trade that is highly marketable and highly valuable, what were their choices? To go make $100,000 in the CFL? The NFL is a monopoly. It is a monopoly, and they have an unholy union with the NCAA. It's an unholy coalition between the two of them, and it is bad for the players. It is really bad for the players. All the power is with the billionaire owners. You want to see some actual player freedom? Look at sports that have international interests, even at the individual level. Tennis, golf, etc. Go look at international soccer. You don't want to pay me this? To hell with you. I'll go play in Italy and I'll make the same money. That's not an option here. It is absolutely a monopoly. Don't even try and tell me it's not. They agreed. Of course they agreed. They don't have any choice. Where are they going to go? It's a monopoly. It's the definition of monopoly, and it's a government-protected monopoly.
Right. Yeah, and it's also a business, like most monopolies are. And when it's business, it's cutthroat. I've been saying this the longest I've been in this industry. I've been saying that about the NFL. We love it. We love to watch it. It's entertaining. It's a game. It's football. But at its core, at its roots, it's a business no matter what. And business isn't fair. Business isn't kind. Business can suck sometimes. And we've seen that in the darker days of the NFL recently and not so recently.
Yeah. So on that note, I think we've hit on the salary cap health, but let's take a look at some of the guys where you could actually get some more salary cap health. There's going to be some players that that could change. We look at what's available now, and this is what's available now. And I said, if you go and look at that cap hit versus dead cap, and then look at the player name, you can get a pretty good idea of, is that player going to be playing on that contract or not? Graham Glasgow has a $14 million cap hit next year. He's got a $3 million dead cap hit.
Bye-bye.
He ain't playing on $14 million next year. I can promise you that. He restructured because he didn't, and took a pay cut because it was either that or he was getting waived. So he negotiated back down to his fair market value to try and stay a little longer. But he's not playing on a $14 million deal next year. I can promise you that. So that's one. Just those type of the places where you can start looking.
Yeah, I wish I had Spot Track pulled up in front of me. I probably should do that. But, you can think of the then, or you can think of the now. There's players on the current books like Sam Martin, for example. I have an article that's going up either tonight or tomorrow morning about the competition at punter between Sam Martin and Corliss Waitman, who the Broncos claimed in January. If they get rid of Sam Martin, that's, I think, plus $2 million coming off the books.
He's on this year's deal. So I'm just looking at, at next year also. But, that is, Sam Martin could be one of those that could go this year for sure. And again, like I said, don't just look at the cap hit versus the dead cap hit, but also then scroll over and look at the number and say, okay, is that player worth what he's getting paid? That's the essence of the contract anyway. $18 million for Garrett Bowles at left tackle versus an $8 million dead. So you'd save 10 if you get rid of him. I think there's probably an extension in the works for him. Wouldn't you think so? That Garrett Bowles at 18 isn't out of the, it's high. It's probably put him for top 10 for next year, but I don't think it's unreasonable either.
No, I mean, that's a left tackle. And aside from quarterback, you can argue that left tackle is the most important position in the NFL. You look at other players. I have the website pulled up now for 2023. Russ is at $27 million. That's going to change when he gets his new deal. But you have Sutton at $18,325, and then Justin Simmons at $18.15 million. That's a lot of money for a safety. As good as Simmons is, it's not a foundational position like cornerback, left tackle, quarterback, etc., or edge rusher. So they had some decisions to make. Also, Ronald Darby at $13 million when you're going to have to pay Patrick Surtain in a couple of years. Josie Jewell at $7.25 million. There's a lot of ways. Like I said, it might be 13th now projected, but the way George Payton operates, I wouldn't be surprised if in terms of cap health, when he gets done with this, with the books, with the roster, if they're top 5 in a year from now or so.
Yeah, there's some massaging to be done for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. Josie Jewell signed this deal for this amount of money. Well, no, it's not. It's got he got what he got in the signing bonus, and then he's got a $5 million negative on his dead cap value for next year, which means he's vulnerable. He's vulnerable to be waived. without a doubt. So that'd be somebody I would want to look at too, as like you just said, that ended up being to me a 1-year deal. Now you mentioned somebody right now, and let's move on just a little bit to CBS did an underappreciated player, and I think did I already tell you who it was, or do you know? Because if you were to come up with an underappreciated player for the Broncos, that'd be kind of hard to get to come up with, just one, or there's a bunch of candidates. So the one that came up with surprised me a little bit, but I have to say I agree.
Let me guess. It's either Draymond Jones or Tim Patrick.
It's Patrick Surtain.
Oh.
It's Patrick Surtain. And if
Damn.
you look again, what's interesting to me is Pro Football Focus in a roundabout way telling you, hey, take our own rankings with our own grades with a grain of salt, because if you look at our rankings, Patrick Surtain wasn't worth a damn last year. He was like 35th or 36th. Now, if you read what we write subjectively or objectively, I always have to think, did I get that one right? Objectively, we write that he's one of the best young corners and could be an all-pro guy this year, despite the fact that our grades had him bottom shelf last season, 36th, 37th as far as our grades last year. So I think it's pretty easy to say non-Pro Bowler. If I'm just, a stat geek looking at a spreadsheet on PFF and I take that to heart, I don't even think twice about Patrick Surtain. So underappreciated on a national level, maybe. I could see that one.
I was not expecting that, because a lot of people, either people who know Patrick Surtain either don't know him in the sense of how good he was last year when you watch the film. People look at his numbers, but when you watch the games, you see a future superstar, a lockdown corner, or they're Broncos fans who realize how good Patrick Surtain is going to be. I just was expecting someone who had a little more name value, or who played a position along the defensive line like Draymond Jones that can get sacks, get after the quarterback. But I love the fact that he's getting that shout right now, because that's going to change. This is the only time Patrick Surtain is ever going to get these most underrated, most underappreciated shouts, because it's not going to hold up for long, man. He's going to own the NFL scene.
Again, if you think that he wasn't in the Pro Bowl last year, but if you think about what at least the local media and some people are talking about him, is that he could be this guy. He still hasn't made his name yet on a national level. So underappreciated. I appreciated that comment.
Yeah.
Underappreciated for me going into from what I saw last year. I thought that Josie Jewell, I think, was a little underrated by Broncos fans from what I saw. Going in, this is a blue collar guy and can do a job. And then, the first few games that I watched him play, I'm like, he's pretty dang good. I think his lateral mobility is a little underrated, but the sample size ended up being, unfortunately, a little small. With him getting hurt, I didn't get to see him for a full season. But that would have been a guy I would have almost expected to just tick the box. Oh, it's going to be somebody like Josie Jewell on here. Or, if we pick an offensive lineman, is there one that would fit into that? There could be breakout stars. I could say, okay, Quinn Miners, but I wouldn't say he's underappreciated because he hasn't done much. For me, underappreciated is, okay, this guy's really good and hasn't gotten the recognition he deserves. And that makes a lot of sense with Patrick Surtain. And like you said, I could go on with the wide receivers pretty easy. I could make a real good argument for Courtland Sutton being the most underappreciated player on the team.
You have
who isn't underappreciated, Zach?
Who's that? Is that Sam Bam? I figured.
Sam Bam is much appreciated. BBM. It's Sam Bam in my head. So if I call you Sam Bam, I know it's BBM. But next cap question. Can teams ever pay above the cap threshold and just pay a bigger luxury tax? Or does the NFL not allow a team to ever go over the cap in any way, shape, or form? They have to be under the cap. There's penalties. It's not like baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but they do have a luxury tax where I think you have to pay 1.5. So for every dollar you go over 180 million or whatever that soft number is, you have to then put a pool into $0.50 into the pool that is then rev shared against some formula for the broke teams that aren't making any money, that the Yankees and Red Sox and TV deals or national TV deals help carry. So no, it's the same cap for everyone. And no matter, you can't just have an owner who says, you know what, I'm worth $75 billion. I don't care what I spend. This is fun for me. They do that in soccer, by the way. I'm going to spend whatever I want to hell with the luxury tax. I'll pay $2 billion to get $1.5 billion on the field. That's fine with me. And you know what? They would do that too if you let them. They would absolutely do that. That's why they have salary caps. But no, it's not the same, Sam. Appreciate the question.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed that, Scott. I will say that I believe all contracts in baseball are fully guaranteed. So that's why there's a luxury tax that allows teams to go over that. But in the NFL, that's not the case. So they don't have any leeway. And just to tack on to the previous thing about underappreciated, you have to be appreciated to be underappreciated. So someone like Quinn Miners is not going to fit that criteria, or maybe even Josie Jewell. That's why Patrick Surtain, thinking about it, I hate to give him credit, but credit where it's due. Good pick.
Yeah, that was, let me see who wrote that. Not Patrick Surtain. That's who I have at the top. Jeff Kerr wrote it on CBS.
Former coworker. Good guy.
Okay, good. I'll give him a little love. I like to.
We'll talk nice about him.
When we're gonna, talk about his stuff, I like to throw in a link. Give him some love as well. That's what they're for. He's probably not getting paid on page views. A lot of us do. But it certainly helps him for sure if the more people read his stuff. But thanks for the question, Sam.
Who's not helping me is K-Hop here trying to hack me. Zach, if the password of your phone is your social, what would it be?
Michaela asked for my credit card. I'd be happy to buy you a cup of coffee, Michaela, in Denver when I head out there. Well, I said when, as if it's a definite, but it's probably.
No, you're coming to the meeting.
Be happy to buy you a cup of coffee.
He'll
I don't
be
buy
there,
people
Michaela.
drinks. I said I quit buying them for people when I quit drinking them, and that was a long time ago. So happy to get you a cup of coffee, though. So appreciate it. So underappreciated. Yeah, I was thinking, okay, one of the receivers was kind of where I was going to go with that. I thought it'd be Sutton or Patrick, because I think Broncos country rates those guys considerably higher than they're viewed in the national media. And that could all change rapidly this year, which, going back to the callback to the beginning of the show, was one of the reasons it was so smart to get them signed before they had their big breakout season. Sutton already did. He had a big season coming off an injury, though. So that he kind of fell back onto the radar a little bit. So I was a little surprised it wasn't a Sutton or Patrick on that one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I do want to give K-Hop a shout. I want to answer this question, Scott. I think we're winding down in a few minutes. So anyone have their questions, comments, concerns, considerations, please fire it in. We'll try to address it in the time we have left. K-Hop asked, Scott, I want to get your thoughts on this. What are the biggest question marks on the team other than right tackle? You go first.
For me, it's the big men in the trenches. If you're out in a 3-4 and DJ Jones is your nose guard, he's a little light for that. I think he can actually be a 3-4 end or a 4-3 defensive tackle. I think he's a little light to be a traditional guard, nose guard. So that concerns me a little bit, because then if you start thinking, who are the players on the other side of him? And I love Deshaun Williams, don't get me wrong, but I don't want him as a starter, so to speak. But when your starters at one of the other sides is Deshaun Williams and McTelvin Agim, it makes me a little nervous. That does. So for me, it's right tackle and interior line strength and depth is for me where I would go with that question.
I think Awuzurike nailed that name, is going to make a push in the interior, maybe beat out McTelvin Agim. But K-Hop, I'd say the entire offensive line, to be quite honest with you. Garrett Bowles we never know what kind of Garrett Bowles we're getting from game to game. Dalton Reisner at left guard, he was a letdown. Cushenberry was kind of bottom 5 at center. Right guard, Miners has some potential, but he's not exactly a star yet. And obviously you mentioned right tackle with Billy Turner, Tom Compton, and Calvin Anderson. One more position that kind of scares me is cornerback. And I say that after Surtain, Darby, K1 Williams. Who is it? Is it Michael Ojemudia? We can't rely on him yet. Who is it? Asang Bassi? Is it Fayon Hicks? They don't really have that next corner after K1 Williams or Damari Mathis. He can be in the mix as well, but there's not the established guy where if one person gets injured, they're one snap away, Scott, from starting Ojemudia opposite Surtain or Ronald Darby. That's a scary thought. He's okay as a cornerback 4, cornerback 1 or 2. I start to worry.
I think those are first world problems, though, Zach. I think that's a little bit of tunnel vision for us. And if we expand and we look at everybody's rosters, I mean, we're talking about depth. Who's got depth at cornerback? Who's got a fourth corner? No one. No one's got a fourth corner out there that's like, oh yeah, we're really good 5 or 6 deep at the cornerback position. With the forced parity and the salary cap and all of those things, you just don't have that type of depth. So yes, that is a concern, but for me, that's a concern everybody's going to have. And the fact that you're able to run off 3 guys up there that you feel really, really good about is a luxury most teams don't have already. So I think we talked about this the other night, Zach, the depth at corner. Yes, I feel good about the depth at corner relative to the rest of the league. Is there a drop off after the starters? Yes, there's a pretty big one. The difference is most people are already down here, so the drop off isn't that far. When your corners are up here, there's a drop off to your backups. So that's where it becomes a little bit scarier for me. And Uzurike, good shout. But 5th round pick, is that how I want to, he's going to have to significantly overperform, and he's fully capable of it. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to go into a Super Bowl contending season thinking that my answer at one of the interior trench spots on defense is a 5th round rookie. That scares the hell out of me.
I guess, though, if we have to stretch and reach to answer this question, it's a good problem to have. It means that George Paton did a really, really fine job constructing the roster, not just starters, but backups as well, depth. They are in excellent hands, and that's a callback to what we said in the early minutes of the show. They're in really, really good hands with George Paton. That's obvious.
Yeah, and again, the fact that you can say that it's fairly easy to pick because everything else is really good. Again, that's a really, really good problem to have. Like I said, depth at corner, first world problems. Most people don't have 3 corners out there that they can depend on. Michaela comes in. I think this is, let me see. Let's use the hockey term on this. Is this the hat trick, or is this the golden sombrero? Is this 4 that she came in? I think this is 4. She's going for the golden sombrero. We're throwing all kinds of stuff out on the ice for it tonight. With the 4-sided signing of Sutton and Patrick, I wonder if Paton knew he was getting Wilson. I don't know that he knew he was getting Wilson per se. Wouldn't surprise me if it was already in place, kind of a gentleman's agreement type. That's something that you work on for a long time. But I fully believe he believed in himself that he was going to fix a quarterback position one way or another. Come hell or high water, he was going to get the quarterback position fixed in the offseason. And he convinced a couple of guys, wide receivers who depend on that quarterback, to sign contract extensions. And then he delivered. I mean, again, the credibility you have now with other free agents and other players, when you say, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. When you're interviewing, what do you think Nathaniel Hackett knew during the interview process? What are you going to do at quarterback? We're getting you Russell Wilson. We got it covered. Okay. That becomes I'm an offensive coordinator. I like to coach, but I also like to succeed. I like to scheme as much as I like to coach up too. It's a lot easier to scheme with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that he knew he was getting Russ, but I think he knew he was getting someone, whether that was Russ or Aaron Rodgers or any other veteran quarterback, maybe a rookie quarterback. He knew, and he probably told Sutton and Patrick, listen, guys, I know it's bad now. I know it's been bad, but it will not be bad much longer. You have my word. I'm going to get a quarterback. And like you said, Scott, he delivered on that. Not just a quarterback, but a 9-time Pro Bowler, former Super Bowl champion in Russell Wilson. And I like the fact that Sutton and Patrick were willing to trust George Paton at getting the quarterback. And I like the fact that Paton invested in 2 of the pillars on offense in Sutton and Patrick.
Now, and finally, just real quick before we get out of here, because I wanted to talk about Pro Football Focus also did a redraft of the 2020 class, because this ties into, did you give up too much? What was it worth? That was the thing that I got. Well, I don't want Green Bay. I don't want Aaron Rodgers because he's going to be too expensive. We don't know what it would take to get him. How can he possibly be too expensive before we've actually bought him, traded for him, whatever. Too much draft capital. Don't want to give it up. I look back at the 2020 NFL draft that PFF did with the benefit of hindsight. So they can stack the best players up in a row. And at number 15, They have the Denver Broncos taking quarterback Jalen Hurts. I like Jalen okay, but is that really the best you can do with the benefit of hindsight at 15? That tells me F them picks. Go get the established star. Go get the 9-time Pro Bowler. And I love the draft. You know I love the draft. I love the hope it brings with you that you're going to get the next superstar and the next guy. But it is an imperfect process. And to get Russell Wilson for 2 first rounds and some players that were surplus to requirements, masterstroke, genius.
Yeah, that's curious. They go with the quarterback, knowing in hindsight that the Broncos would end up with Russell Wilson. So why would they go?
You did at the time. He said at this point in time, the Broncos were still willing to give Drew Lock a chance, but of course, following 5 up and down starts during his rookie season, the benefit of hindsight tells us that Lock wasn't the answer. So yeah, again, so if I'm going to use hindsight in that instance, why wouldn't I use hindsight in? Okay, well they got Russell Wilson. And going back, the next pick, the Falcons and Broncos are back to back at 16. They struck gold. The Falcons struck gold with AJ Terrell at 16. And the best they can do at 16 with the benefit of hindsight is Michael Onwenu. Onwenu? That just tells me, we love the draft and the cost control in it, but we overrate it just a little bit. Just a little bit. This is a tough damned league. And there's just not that many impact players from year to year. And if you can go get your franchise quarterback and it doesn't cost you, half a decade worth of picks, that was a pretty good move.
I guess I'll steel man the argument. I'm a bigger Jalen Hurts guy than most other people out there. I think he could be a franchise quarterback. I was even willing for the Broncos, if they wanted to, before us, to trade some picks for Jalen Hurts if he wasn't the answer in Philadelphia. Looking at it objectively, if you take out Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts is more accomplished at a way more valued position than Jerry Jeudy was. So if we're redrafting 2020, then Jalen Hurts would have been a better pick than Jerry Jeudy. But in hindsight, once again, if you knew that, why not go for another player that can help Russell Wilson? Maybe a right tackle. That'd be nice for the Broncos not to ignore that for once. But
Jerry Jeudy falls to 29, but stays in the first round. I wasn't sure that he would, to be honest with you. Okay, quick story on Jalen Hurts, and then we'll get out of here. I've mentioned before that one of my good friends is a world-renowned trainer here in the Metro Atlanta area. Jalen Hurts was one of his guys, and they just posted like a most explosive list, and it had some metrics behind it, and Jalen Hurts was at the top of it. My friend Chip posted on his Instagram account. He said, funny story. He said, when I had Jalen Hurts here, he was consistently timing in the 4.3s, but he wouldn't let me tell anybody. He wouldn't let me say a word because he was afraid they would try and make him a running back because of his height and because of his he's a thick dude. He was afraid they wouldn't let him play quarterback if they knew how fast he was. So we went to the combine. He said he ran just fast enough to be the fastest quarterback there, but he didn't run as fastest. He ran low 4.4s or 4.40, but had been in the 4.3s for him the whole time. So he goes, so I'm not surprised at all that Jalen Hurts is at the top of this list. And very cool story. On that note, Zach, why don't you get us out of here and get us ready for a nice weekend?
Man, all I know is Jalen Hurts was my fantasy quarterback last year, and his rushing upside alone, man. If you can get him in fantasy, I would highly recommend that. But that was the Huddle Up podcast. No, I didn't. I'm not going to get this down, man.
Read the Twitter handle, man.
This was the Mile High Huddle podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle. Okay, that banner's gone. You can go to the store for all your merch needs at huddleuppod.com. So that's where it gets tricky. It's huddleuppod.com, but the Mile High Huddle pod. So going to take some getting used to. And facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. Like that page and follow that page, guys. If you haven't, go to Apple Podcast and leave your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some Mile High Huddle podcast merch each and every month. But if you can't do any of those things, please do these 3 things as you see ticking below you. Subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you. Scott, last word.
Real quick, my last word is say hello to Gary Leeds Palmer, who came in here with some stars, and he says, I made it. I was like, well, where's GLP? Where's he been? He said, Zach and Scott, love you guys. Go Broncos. We love you too. Thank you so much for being here and throwing some stars our way as we head for the weekend. No Mile High Legends tomorrow morning. Carl is off tomorrow morning. We will be back tomorrow with Dove Valley Deep Divers. I will not be here because I've got to drive an hour and a half for a pair of softball games or baseball games in the 95-degree heat. I will not be here, but you can join the DVDD boys tomorrow night at 6 Mountain.
Yeah, we're off until Sunday. Have a great weekend, Scott. Best of luck in the baseball games. Have a great weekend, everyone. We're back on Sunday night, same time, same place. Scott and I, 6 o'clock Mountain, 8 o'clock Eastern. We can't talk tonight, either of us. Anyway, take care, and as always, guys, go Broncos.